And the eyeball still doesn't work. It's fine. It's fine. Started it. It's fine. We'll figure it out. It's gonna be... Got the cat book. Hi, Lady Aoife. Good to see you. I promise we were doing stuff. We are doing stuff. I got held up. Me and Dad were talking. It was just extra.
My bad.
Then I was making tea. Hello. I've been updating YouTube. Yes, I have. We were getting worried. I haven't been like this late for a hot minute, so I'm sorry I'm late. Yes, I was updating the YouTube literally right before this. I was downloading some of the other live content. I've been trying to download the Halloween special for ages, and it's 4 hours long. So TikTok is like, "Are you sure?" And I'm like, "I'm positive." And they're like, "We're not positive." And I'm like, "Well, you better get there." I would like my content. It is 4 hours long, and TikTok is like, "That's a lot of footage." And I'm like, "We should get that though. It's mine." Anyway, and of course, I'll strong arm it. I'm trying. TikTok does not like to let me have my content all of the time. I don't know why. Maybe it's my phone. Maybe it's my internet connection. Maybe it's... I don't know. It's fine. I'm trying to get some of the footage that I'm missing from Desolations under control, so I'll have that updated just as soon as I can finish it. I was editing it earlier. I was editing 2 videos at once. I had one open on my phone, and I'm just sort of scroll picking, and then the other one I've got open on the Studio One, and I'm editing that. So I have an earbud in one ear, my headphones over top, and every time Dad talks, I can hear him through my microphone. And I was like, this is a lot.
You didn't tell me what you were doing. You just came over here and just started farting around. So
did you not notice I had an earbud in and the headphones on?
I just saw the headphone. I didn't see the earbud.
That's why the headphone was off in the back here, and I was like, it's back here, and I had it earbud in here, and then I had the other headphone on here.
I'm not observant.
By all accounts, I should be getting more done. I'm just acclimating to higher stress levels. So there's that. It's fine though. We know. Anyway, we're starting a new book today. Is everybody excited? Did you all see the announcement? We're going to be doing Shadow on the Glass by Johnathan Howard. And if you'll remember, we've already read Johnathan Howard before. This is by the same author that did Johannes Cabal, who I believe we all like. So I could be wrong about that, but still, Shadow on the Glass is a little bit different, but still has a lot of Johnathan Howard's signature kind of humor in it. Also, I'm going to go ahead and tell you now, there's a lot of accents in this one. If you don't want me to do the accents, tell me now, because I'm bad at it. Don't laugh at me. Don't laugh at me.
I don't think I'd be able to do it.
I don't think I'm going to be able to do it either. I think it's going to be terrible. But we might all have fun laughing about it. I don't know. We got, it's everything. Look, I've been describing it all day.
I love the way you describe it.
An accent wearing another accent's hat on top of it. Because almost all of them are English. Some of them are Australian, but almost all of them are pretending to be more posh than they actually are. So we've got a Manchurian accent trying to be posh. We've got East End trying to be RP, and we've got Australians trying to pretend like they're English, and it's all one big grab bag of like English accents thrown in a bucket, and then you shake it up real fast, is what we're doing. So that's the way I'm going to do it, because I don't know any other way to do it. And this wouldn't be such an issue if it wasn't indicated repeatedly in the material. Like, it indicates with the way that it's written that sometimes they dip into like their other accent on accident or and so forth. And sometimes they full on call each other out on it, like, oh hey, you know, like your RP is slipping, dog. Like, they'll do that repeatedly to the point where it's almost impossible to get around. I could just read it straight and then you'll know whenever it's mentioned, but almost some of it is written to where you would have to do that accent. But I can read it straight. I won't be upset if you don't want to hear the accents. And if you do, I gotta tell you, I've been looking up YouTube videos all day, and I don't know how well I internalized all of it. It's a lot to remember. It's like 5 separate accents that I've just been flip-flopping through all day. It's been a time. Dad,
I don't think I could be able to do it.
Looks like he's gonna have a great time.
I always have a great time.
I'm glad. Oh my god, it's a goose hat. When did they put this in there? Oh my god.
Are you wearing a goose hat?
Yeah, you missed it.
Oh, damn it.
I'm sorry. It was very sudden. It went away like after like 1 second. Thank you for the goose.
I'm just going to give you a goose hat now, just to see.
We're all silly gooses here.
I'm a graduate of Silly Goose University.
Dad graduated from Silly Goose University. He wants you all to know that.
Yeah.
So, I also don't know. Mostly, whenever we start a new book, I'm not sure how to block it out. Because typeset and font indicates that it might not be the same. For instance, on Tales of the Peculiar, we were getting through an average of 50 pages a time. And then Dad's doing something. What are you doing?
I'm looking for the goose hat.
Looking for the goose hat. All right. Oh, thank you, Swiftlet. Now I'm distracted because I know you're just gonna find the goose hat eventually.
Well, it depends on how many coins it is, because I only have so many and I'm not putting any more on here.
Get perfectly fair. Donald, thank you for the follow. But yeah, so I don't know how much we're going to get through in this book. We're going to try and get through as much as we can, and then I will block out accordingly. Next episode, Chris, look up... What? That's all it said. Swiftblood left a message for it. Oh, there's the goose hat. There you go.
Dope. Oh my god!
Dad's having a great time. Thank you for that. Well, thank you, Louise. You don't gotta wear your fingers out mashing that like button or anything, but I appreciate it. So...
That was fantastic.
We did all our nice catching up time. I'm so glad that you joined me for this. I do like Johnathan Howard. We'll see how annoying my English accent is as we go forward. But this will be Shadow on the Glass. Is anybody ready to start reading? I wasted a little bit of time getting here, so sorry about that. Normally we stop at the top at 8. 2. Alright. Chapter 1. The Spiritist. Ectoplasm was the tattletale of the amateur. That was the opinion of William Grant, and hadn't he made a detailed and considered study of the phenomenon? Ectoplasm was, his opinion continued, trite and workaday, and worst of all, a mark of desperation. How poorly conducted must a seance be to require strands of extramortal material be produced to convince the sitters that the spiritist involved was worth the candle, or, more exactly, the fee for the session? No. A properly conducted seance, note the acute accent, was at its heart a performance, and it is a poor performer who relies on props. Effusions of ectoplasm accompanied by the undignified cacophony of rattles, tambourines, and trumpets played by an unseen ensemble. Those might impress the yokels and the sticks, and even the petite bourgeoisie in their homogeneous villas clustered in suburban cantons, but these were not the rabbits for which William Grant cared to set his snares. He preferred bigger beasts, possessed of more rarefied sensibilities and substantially larger financial resources. For an example, take the household of Miss Iris Donnelly, a new widow of 6 weeks' standing, and likely longer had she but known it. 6 weeks since the lutein bell struck dolefully on the floor of the underwriter's room at the Royal Exchange to mark the loss of Her Majesty's gunboat, the HMS Bellevue, overdue at Cape Town, presumed devoured by a squall somewhere down Africa's western coast. 6 weeks now, and for 46 more shall the black crape hang upon the pictures and mantels of the house, the mirrors remain covered, and Mrs. Donnelly wear the weeds. It was a large house and well appointed, for Captain Donnelly was, as an aside, independently wealthy thanks to the investments of his father, which, by dint of being an only child, he had inherited only a couple of years before. But now he was gone, and his poor widow was not so very poor. After a decent period, there were plenty of bachelors who would be laying their suits at her door. Before then, however, Mrs. Donnelly's worth would be decreased by a useful sum if William Grant had anything to do with it. It had taken satisfyingly little work to gain an invitation. The reputation of Grant's enterprise was good among the chattering class, and this privately amused him. No, so subtle was the manner of criminality that he practiced nowadays that new victims lined up to be fleeced, just as sheep followed the shepherd. It was all, he had long since concluded, a matter of managing expectations. That and having the best partner a chap in his line could possibly wish for. He had carried out his preliminary interview with the prospective client, Mrs. Donnelly, and had been pleased to note, in passing, how well appointed and tastefully the house was presented. He also noted a couple of items of Catholic iconography on display but in shadowed corners, faith in society being slightly at odds. He didn't care. If people wanted to believe in God or gods, it was all the same to him. A vulnerability to the occult. An exploitable vulnerability. The interview had otherwise not been especially helpful. Mrs. Donnelly was distracted by her abiding grief, and that was good in and of itself, because the capacity of the distracted to accept the objectively absurd is so much greater. From the perspective of a reconnoiter into the blasted moor of her grief, however, it was useless. And Grant determined to be doubly sure of his background research. Lizzie was a wonder, it was true, but he couldn't send her in without at least some ammunition. Except, now that they stood on the doorstep of the house some 5 days later, she was not Lizzie. No, Lizzie Whittle was not a suitable name, nor even Elizabeth Whittle. Not for a spiritist renowned within the whispered conversations of the middle class. No, standing with Grant on that doorstep was no less than the new darling of the metropolis's darkened parlors, Miss Cerulia Trent. In her mid-20s, fashionably coiffed, elegantly but not fussily dressed, understated jet jewelry, every detail was intended to project a quiet, otherworldly focus, right down to the careful softening and pumicing of her palms and fingers to remove every trace of her East End youth. The door was answered by a middle-aged man. Definitely not the butler, and Grant read the situation immediately from previous experience. The servants had either been given the evening off and told in no uncertain terms not to be back until 10, or they were confined to barracks for the duration. This man was a friend, and Grant saw only curiosity in his face, not skepticism. Good. It was trite and uncomfortable if they had to trot out negative emanations from unsympathetic minds in order to put the kibosh on a session. Lizzie could use a good sympathetic friend as a fulcrum to turn an evening to their advantage with such grace that it took an effort for Grant not to applaud at the sheer chutzpah of it. It was like being savvy with how a conjurer does a trick and yet still in awe at the flawless spectacle of expertise in motion. Lizzie had always been good with people. Grant had seen that right from the first day he clapped eyes on her not even 2 years before. He'd not been long in the great city himself, and had almost instantly got himself the nickname of Manchester among the crowd within which he moved. Out in his first digs in Spitalfields. It was not a nickname he wanted to keep. He'd left that northern city under, if not a cloud, then certainly a light mist of suspicion. Manchester Police Detectives Division was starting to take an interest in his activities, and that was bad enough. But when he dabbled in quack medicines, he discovered too late that he had stumbled upon the person bête noire of the great man himself, Detective Inspector Jerome Caminada. Caminada regarded quacks with a biblical loathing, and when Grant heard that he'd been asking around after his modest enterprise, Grant was off to Manchester London Road Station the next morning with a hastily packed trunk to buy a one-way ticket to the capital. A Mancunian born and bred, he hated to leave, but if there was one corner of Manchester that he had never yet experienced, it was Strangeways Prison, and he would forego the pleasure of its hospitality all his born days if he had any say on the matter. It had taken time and elocution lessons, but he no longer sounded Mancunian except in extremes when he might forget himself. Now he possessed a generic sort of London accent at which no one in that city would raise an eyebrow. He hated it. The accent sat in his mouth, throat, and sinus like a fistful of gravel, but it was camouflage. He hoped for the day when he was wealthy enough to go elsewhere, drop the pretense, and start enjoying vowels again. He just hoped that he hadn't entirely forgotten how to sound like a normal human being by then and would not be forced to spend the rest of his days as a Londoner. Elizabeth Whittle, by contrast, had been born in the East End, and when he first met her, he had called her a cat because she yowled and spat so much. She wasn't working the streets yet, a small miracle given her looks, but he could see that it was on the cards, and he decided on an impulse to take her under his wing. The act turned out to be more brother-like than he had at first anticipated, and somewhat to his own surprise, he had never taken her to his bed. Soon enough, their relationship settled into those platonic lines, and he realized that he never would, a resolution that bemused him more than it disappointed. For her part, Lizzie was an adroit pupil, shedding her own accent for something more refined, far more easily than he had abandoned his own. What especially engaged him, however, was her way with people. It went far beyond simply being affable or approachable. She showed a sometimes disconcerting aptitude for reading people as easily as if they had stuck a scrap of paper bearing their intentions and inner thoughts upon their foreheads in a particularly frank parlor game. "Regular Sherlock Holmes you all go," he had once said to her, "Lay off," she replied, laughing. She didn't laugh often, the metamorphosis from Lizzie Whittle to Cerulia Trent having made her more serious and self-contained, and so he valued that sound. As they were led into the Donnelly manse, the silence of the house weighed upon Grant, the air of an endless wake afflicting his nerve, and not for the first time, making him wonder how doggedly the Metropolitan Police might pursue harmless purveyors of useless medicines. But that was him. Lizzie, Cerulia, bloomed in that atmosphere of enduring grief. Her eyes brightened and she looked around the gloomy hallway, darkly and dirtily paneled a century before, and the walls disfigured with unremarkable prints of assorted naval vessels, and smiled slightly as if she could see friendly spirits upon the parapet and the stairs. The family friend paused to look at her curiously, and she turned her smile upon him. "This is not such an unhappy house, I think. The dead are not resentful." She closed her eyes and then opened them a moment later, focusing squarely upon the man's own. It was a simple tactic, pure stagecraft, yet subtly mesmeric in its effect. "I think we may well find Captain Donnelly tonight." These latter words made the man blink and frown, and Grant instantly knew that all was not right. Lizzie must have too, but she maintained her serenity because Lizzie was never aught but a marvel, and could show grace under pressures that would buckle a diving bell. "But the intention, which is to say, the purpose of this evening's meeting is not to speak to the captain," said the man. Grant raised an eyebrow. Inwardly, he stormed. He had spent days researching every publicly available fact about Captain Ernest Donnelly, late of the HMS Bellevue, late of this world. He knew his service career, his club, his family, his schooling, his interest. Ye gods and little fish, he knew Donnelly's shoe size, thanks to a chatty cobbler. He had rendered every fact onto lists written in clear block capitals, and Lizzie had sat and read them through time and again until she could rattle off anything with which he tested her. All that effort, and all for naught. This is what he felt. What he said was, "Oh?" At that moment, Mrs. Donnelly entered the hall with a brace of spinster friends in tow. "Mr. Grant," she said, a far more alert creature than the one he had interviewed a few days before. She looked at Lizzie. "And you must be Miss Trent. I'm so glad that you've come. I've heard such wonderful things about you." "Mrs. Donnelly," said Grant, "I think we must have been speaking at cross purposes when last I visited. I was given the impression that you wished to communicate with your husband." "Oh," Mrs. Donnelly considered this. "Did I say that?" Grant thought back on it, and his heart froze. No, he didn't remember her being so specific. Now he turned his mind to it. He had assumed that was what she wanted based on her recent bereavement, and had taken every reference to him to mean the lost captain. Now it transpired that the seance was for some other random soul of which they had no prior intelligence. It could be her childhood puppy for all they knew. "Ah," said Miss Cerulia Trent blandly. "Then there has been an unfortunate misunderstanding. I've spent the last day or two attuning myself to find your husband." Grant could have kissed her. She was buying time to arrange for another session during which the mistake could be repaired. Except, no, that wasn't Cerulia Trent's plan at all. "But," she continued, gifting Mrs. Donnelly a strange, dreamlike smile, "paradoxically, James is closer still. I can offer no guarantees as to the clarity of communication, but The smile faded in Trent's eyes. It was impossible to think of her as Lizzie Whittle when she was like this, lost focus, seeking out a higher plane just beyond the veil. He is here. Grant racked his memory. James. That was the name of the Donnellys' older son. Their younger, Reginald, was currently away at boarding school. Yes, James had died, 2-3 years ago? He will not enter into me, said Trent, her eyes closing, her forehead furrowing. He is diffident, apologetic. I will speak as he speaks. An echo. Her face slackened and her eyes opened, exposing only whites. One of the spinsters behind Mrs. Donnelly gasped at the sight. Mama. Her voice had become oddly toneless, the voice of a somniloquist. I am so sorry. Can you ever forgive me? James, Mrs. Donnelly said in a ghastly whisper. Is that truly you? I should have said no to Papa. I would still be here for you now if I had. Your father always had to have his way, said Mrs. Donnelly. Grant saw the tears start in her eyes and part of him curdled. He hated it when they cried, but he always forgot how much he hated it after their checks cleared, only to be reminded the next time. Now the sea has taken you both from me. It was the yellow fever, Mama. I caught it when we went ashore at Macao. A ruminative pause. I thought I was getting better. He took you from me? She was crying freely now. The spinster who had not gasped stood by her and put her arm around her. Stupid, stupid man. He always had to have the last word. Papa knows he was wrong. Mrs. Donnelly looked up suddenly at this. He will not speak. He carries his own purgatory with him. I have forgiven him. Please, Mama, you must forgive him too. He only ever wanted what he thought was best for me, and that was to be like him. I cannot, she said in a small voice. He has taken too much from me. Then think of Reggie. He is blameless in all this. Think of his future. I should watch over you both, always, and so shall Papa. What is done. Please allow for my hope that one day you will forgive him too. I love you, Mama. Miss Cerulia Trent blinked, and when she did, her eyes ceased to be so alarming. He's gone, she said faintly. May I sit down? William Grant didn't know whether to be delighted, angry, or terrified, so he settled for astonished. They were in a hansom on its way to the Kensington house, where they both had rooms. Miss Trent had neither offered nor been pressed to repeat the experiment, and the next hour had been occupied by a gathering in repressed spirits while the little visitation had been discussed. Miss Trent had, he had noted, got in quickly with an explanation that the late James Donnelly had not communicated with her in words exactly, so she had interpreted his intentions onto the clumsy mode of mortal speech, thus forestalling any pettifogging complaints as to, "That's not how he used to speak." As it was, Mrs. Donnelly said that was exactly the way James used to speak, and this was confirmed by those of her friends who had known the man in life. There weren't noting what I wrote to you about yellow fever, Lizzie. Where'd that come from? In the oblique light from the streetlights as the hansom rattled along, he could see her profile and that she was smiling. You're talking like a northern barbarian again, Bill Grant, she said. She was right, which didn't improve his temper. He realigned his speech into the hated mode and tried again. Don't change the subject. How'd you know about the yellow fever and where he caught it? Insurance. I went to the library and went through the newspaper archive. You read the captain's death announcement, didn't you? The one for James is very different. Chalk and cheese. The one for James is much more personal. Flowery, even. Losing him broke his mother's heart. Captain Donnelly's loss was presented as dry as the sand on the Sahara. And it mentioned yellow fever. Oh no, just a fatal sickness. So I dressed as a scullery maid looking for work and got chatting with the butler at the back door. He was very helpful. She laughed, a half laugh that emerged from her nostrils as a derisive snort. Men are such awful gossips. You did what? I got the job done, didn't I? Told me about the old man bullying his son into the service and then what killed James in Brazil. She reached into her reticule and produced a small bag that chinked pleasingly when she shook it. No idea how much is in here. Seemed rude to ask at the time, but it's gold. Certainly worth the effort we expended to get it. Lizzie bloody Whittle. He shook his head. You're a prodigy at this game. The name's Miss Cerulia Bloody Trent, she replied, and there was a smirk in her voice as she said it. The house in Kensington was cosmopolitan enough that smelling salts were not required at the sight of a single woman entering the apartments of a gentleman, or vice versa. Grant preferred to visit Miss Cerulia Trent than have her visit him, as he felt his rooms were, at best, utilitarian and at worst, boring. He had never quite got the hang of decoration. There were some bits and pieces of exotica that he had bought off market barrows with the hope that he might seem traveled and worldly wise, but there was no coherence in his choices, and the effect was of somebody who just randomly bought a lot of things off market barrows. He had also bought a collection of 80-year-old hunting scenes and hung them around the place, having thought they might lend it to some old-world gravitas. The first time Lizzie, which is to say Cerulia, had clapped eyes upon them, she had said nothing, but only given him a sideways glance that he did not like at all. Now, the ludicrous men in their hunting pink jumping over hedgerows on anatomically unlikely horses embarrassed him, and it was only the specter of blank walls that prevented him selling them again. He needed something better, but what constituted better evaded him in his wounded aesthetic. The rooms of Miss Cerulia Trent, in comparison, were lavishly appointed and perfect as a consultancy space for those clients that wished to come to her. Gewgaws and bric-a-brac from Rome to Tokyo clustered the surfaces and the walls. Silken embroideries draped the furniture, which itself was tastefully outre and more than enough to satisfy any visitor that they were in the den of an impressive intellect out of the norm. That it had all been selected by a former market girl out of the East End with no formal education, but yet possessed of a quick, resourceful, and hungry mind, may have amused Lizzie. It certainly amused Grant, who had appreciated from an early age that the greatest asset of the upper echelons lay in their inherited wealth and the opportunities it offered, not in their breeding, such as it was. Grant liked those rooms. Sitting there amidst the artifacts of a dozen other cultures, he felt somehow transported himself, and that beyond the heavy velvet curtains upon the windows lay something greater and more unfathomably exotic than a grimy city full of coppers who would have him up before the beak in a heartbeat if they should ever once get an inkling of what he was up to. Lizzie was standing before the guarded fireplace, looking at the brass Buddha that sat there on the mantelpiece beside a quietly ticking French carriage clock. "Do you believe in God?" she asked suddenly. Inured to her odd little moments of philosophical inquiry, he replied, "Yes," instantly. "Why?" That stumped Grant. For the honest answer would have been, because everybody else does. But that didn't strike him as very satisfying, even to himself. Lizzie watched him struggle in unfamiliar territory for a few seconds before saying, "What sort of kind, benevolent God would have killed James Donnelly like that and driven a wedge between his father and his mother, such as she could hardly give a tuppenny damn whether her husband died?" She touched the cheek of the Buddha with her fingertip. "I sometimes think the Buddhist might be onto something, you know? What goes around comes around." "Is that what they believe?" said Grant, who had no idea what Buddhists might think, or even where on the globe he might find Buddha land. "It's a little more complicated than that, but in essence, yes." "Well," said Grant, rising and helping himself to a sweet sherry from the unlocked Tantalus, as it was becoming evident that Lizzie wasn't going to offer him one. "Given what we're up to, it's probably just as well that they're wrong." She looked at him. "So you prefer hell?" He had no answer to that either, so she added, "To the Buddhist, life is a treadmill to become divine. To them, we're already living in hell." Grant busied himself with the glass. There was no talking with Lizzie when she was being so very cerulean. "I may be onto something. There, drink, Lizzie." She shook her head. "Divvy up the take, Bill, there's a love. I'm tired." He took the bag from a reticule and emptied it onto the table. He whistled at the sight of so many gold sovereigns before starting to separate them into 2 equal mounds. There was an uneven number, and he slid the spare to Lizzie's stack without hesitation. The evening had gone from near disaster to unexpected triumph thanks to her, after all. And William Grant was the fairest of criminals. "How are we gonna move next with Mrs. Donnelly? Have you got anything in mind?" Lizzie shook her head. Nothing. If she invites us again, I shall regretfully tell her no. Her son has moved on to a better place, and her husband is too ashamed to ever speak to her again. She still has Reginald, and should concentrate her efforts on raising him properly. At some point, her anger with her husband will fade, and then her grief will open like a wound. Her suffering isn't over yet. We won't add to it." Grant scooped up his share and put it in his pocket. "Is that a conscience you're getting, girl?" She turned to face him, crossing her arms. "I've never lacked for one, Bill Grant, and nor have you. I saw your face tonight. Next time, let's stick to people what have got coming, eh?" She considered her words. "I mean, let's stick to people that have it coming. Bloody hell, I'm sounding like I've just walked off selling oranges in the halls. I truly am tired. Go on, Bill, sling a hook. I need some sleep before I forget how to be cerulean a trick altogether." Grant laughed, but accepted the cue gracefully. He drained his glass, gathered up his overcoat and hat, and went to the door. "Not you, girl. You're natural. But I know what you mean. Let's make our pile and go and do something that won't get the boys in blue excitable, eh? Perhaps we should leave London, Try our luck in France." Lizzie smiled and shook her head. "You in bloody France? You don't even speak the lingo." I speak a bit of the parlez-vous," he said, stung. "You'll need more than a bit if we're going to be wolves over there, not sheep." She looked off into the middle distance. "Maybe I could learn it." "Maybe you could," said Grant, confident. Then she probably could, and would certainly have a better accent than him, but mainly pleased that she was at least accepting the possibility of falling upon the moneyed French. He'd heard stories of Gallic wealth, and he wished to test, and in any case, it felt more patriotic to rob foreigners. She read him as easily then as she read any of the other books she had amassed in the adjoining room. It pleased her to call her library. No promises, Bill Grant, but maybe a change of scenery wouldn't be so awful. Now, clear off. Madame Cerulia Trent requires her beauty sleep. That is the end of chapter 1. Oh my god. Okay. It's about 9.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, tea. I got made tea for this. It seemed fitting. I love Lizzie. Yeah, me too. I like Lizzie. I just like thinking of this like really smart Cockney girl. Like she's really smart, but occasionally it's very obvious where they'll put two sentences together that are the same and he'll write them differently. So like you're like, oh, clearly that's the accented bit. And I'm like, there's no possible way I could do that without doing the accent. But still, this is chai tea. I made chai tea.
Do you want another cup real quick?
Yeah, before I have to dip back in 2 minutes.
Considering you just downed that in one, like it was a shot.
I like this, this ethical morality of criminal enterprise. Where they make an uneven number of money and she can have it. They don't ever at any point fall into the I'm gonna stab my partner in the back thing. None of that. That is not where this story is going. I think you all will like where the story is going.
I'm already enjoying the
There is a moral code to criminals.
Well, yeah.
But I do like them as a pair. It's very fun. I don't like the accent wearing a hat though. I don't like that. Because it's hard enough trying to do one accent. And then it's no, do an accent with another accent's hat on. And I'm like, no. But no, that makes me so much more anxious.
But why for?
The British are going to come for me. And historically, when Britain comes for people, it doesn't go well. Sorry.
I mean, you're not wrong.
How wrong am I? Exactly. All right. Well, we gotta... Thanks, Denny. Glad you all enjoyed that joke. All right. Who is ready for chapter 2? How terrible is it listening to me do accents? Do you want me to stop? I will stop. That's just another question I want to ask. 242? That seems like 4. Keep doing them. Alright. You got it. Chapter 2. The Visitors. And so, this was the nature of the business of Miss Cerulia Trent and Mr. William Grant. Immoral, certainly. Lucrative, definitely. Criminal, well, perhaps not. For they never asked for money, trusting to the strictures of society, of social niceties, to bind their clients as tightly as a leather stock. The middle class was famously obsessed with money, and equally very keen not to talk about it. The citizens of Kensal and Flingley were not vulgarians who bragged about their wealth. They were not buccaneers or Americans. Wealth was to be assiduously garnered at well nigh any cost, and once acquired, it was to be a source of mild embarrassment. Only the nouveau riche might be expected to make a song and dance about it, but who wanted to be the nouveau riche? Nobody, least of all the nouveau riche. So there was form to observe, and one such was that a service should always be paid for, even something as extraordinary as speaking for the dead. Thus, bags of sovereigns, hastily scribbled and uncrossed checks, even jewelry found itself in the hands of Miss Trent and Mr. Grant. They, for their part, only acknowledged these offerings with a pained little nod that seemed to say, "But that we could eschew this earthly lucre, but alas, we must needs keep a roof above our heads and food in our larder. O gross world of materiality, what were we are reduced thus?" And then they went home and drank champagne. As one does. That these were offerings freely given without importuning was an important point. The kind of important point that makes the counsel for their defense very happy. Even a barrister wet behind the ears and possessed of a pristine wig could easily make that argument that a gift freely given can in no way be regarded as having been extorted by foul means. Is there a world of spirits with which Miss Trent might communicate? Prove that there isn't. Is Miss Trent possessed during these sessions? She claims not, only that she hears voices and repeats what they say. Who can say that she's lying? Plus all those vulgar drums and bugles and effusions of ectoplasm that prove to be only bleached muslin, she has no truck with such flummery. She and her reputation are reliant only upon what she says, and what she says carries weight with her listeners. This is why they reward her, and if there is a crime being committed here, it is as intangible as the spirits that may or may not attend Miss Trent. Is it a seance or only a performance of a seance? So many uncertainties, all too feathery to convince the stout English yeomen who make up juries. In any case, so delicately whispered was the business of Trent and Grant among the comfortably well-to-do of London that it seemed very unlikely to ever make its way to the indelicate shell-like ears of the Rosers, and that was to the good. The only people who might report them were their clients, and as their clients were apparently as pleased as anyone communing with the souls of the recently dead might be, that seemed an unlikely direction from which to be chirped, which is to say, informed upon to the police. This, then, was the state of affairs as Trent and Grant gently absorbed money from people who could afford it, in return for a little performative grief counseling. Everyone was happy, or at least as happy as the tragedy of bereavement ever allows. They might have carried on slowly and patiently, turning tears into gold indefinitely, or at least until they grew weary of it, and decamped to the Riviera to practice some new wheeze upon the French, but for events that began with Grant meeting a troubled man upon the doorstep of his house in Kensington as he was about to leave for his lunch one day. He opened the door to find this man studying the plate upon the gatepost. His first impression was mixed, but little of it was good. The fellow was not tall, perhaps an inch or two over 5 feet, and as muscular as a boxer. Grant could see how his build wrestled unhappily with the serge suit he wore like an imposition, his wardrobe completed with a pair of brown boots and a bowler hat upon his head, its brim curled to the degree that the unfashionable found fashionable. The man himself was home to a full beard, the signs of a fading tan, a disturbingly intense stare, and "You, Mr. William Grant," an interesting accent. He didn't look like any sort of police officer Grant had ever seen before, so he replied, "Yes, I am he. How may I help you?" The man didn't answer at first, but looked up and down the street. It was not an unpleasant street, nor even a thoroughfare, but the man did not like it, and the street did not seem fond of the man either. He struck Grant as a creature of the wide open spaces, and the encroaching stone and brick of the metropolis imposed upon and contained him. "I was just going out," said Grant, "but I can spare you a few minutes. Would you like to come in?" The man nodded and entered out of the day, visibly relieved to do so. Grant led the way up the stairs and did not enjoy a single step of it. He had seen men like this often enough in his life. Quiet men for whom violence was only a chore, but a chore diligently performed even unto the sticking point. If a bookie had appeared on the landing and offered Grant evens that the man was carrying a blade that was something more than a pocket knife, he would have accepted the bet instantly. The walk up to his rooms had never seemed so long as it did with his back exposed to such an individual. Yet they reached Grant's rooms, and he showed the man into the one he used as his office. The man was diffident, taking off his bowler in a spasm and wringing the rim in his hands as he spoke. "Thing is, it's like this, Mr. Grant. You represent that medium, don't you, Miss Trent?" Grant smiled. "She wouldn't like it if she heard you call her that. She prefers spiritist. But she can talk to the dead, can't she? That's what my governor heard." On the doorstep, Grant would have been hard pushed to definitively identify the man's accent from those words. South African, perhaps? But now he had more to work with. He was fairly confident that the fellow was Australian. The Australians were a race distilled from boated criminals back in the day, so perhaps he had been unfair to identify this man as one. A man can't help his forebears, after all. And some apples do drop far from the tree. Australia, he was told, had been transfigured from a midden heap upon which the empire emptied its goals into a bountiful land, fecund with opportunity, natural resources, and a variety of venomous creatures. A wise, hard-working man who made the most of his former while avoiding the latter might do well for himself. This train of thought also led Grant to recall newspaper stories that he had read in recent months, and drew him to the conclusion that he might well know who this man's governor actually was. She hears voices, that's true, and the evidence indicate that they are likely to be voices of the dead. Beyond that, she won't make any claims. Somewhere a hypothetical counsel for the defense applauded such equivocalness. "Governor's heard good things about her, that's all. You see, he lost his missus a couple years ago, and, well, he ain't never really got over it." He ranged that disturbing stare upon Grant once more, and Grant suddenly started wondering again if the man was armed. He just wants some comfort, to know she's all right in the other place. Your Miss Trent, she could do that for him. She could try, but you must tell your master that there are no guarantees in experiments such as this. He knows that. Oh, and he asked me to ask you what the fee would be. There's no fee. Miss Trent does what she does to help people. That's not to say there are no expenses to cover and everyday bills to meet, but we depend on gifts for those. If your master wishes to contribute, it will be gratefully received, but it's not mandatory. There will be no invoices or receipts. No physical evidence of fraud, added the hypothetical counsel in Grant's imagination, nodding his approval. Well then, will she visit? Visit who and where? The man reached into his breast pocket and produced a card. Grant read it and was in no way surprised to find it belonged to Sir Johnathan Clay. It could hardly have been anyone else, given the manner of herald he had sent before him. Johnathan Clay had gone to Australia as a youth and made the most of those opportunities, meandering from trade to trade until he had enough capital to start his own mining company. This company had prospered, and Clay had become prodigiously rich. Finally, in his 50s, he had returned to the old country to enjoy the fruits of his labors, leaving the company in safe hands to continue to enrich him from afar. On his return, he had duly been knighted for his contributions to the economy of the empire, but his horizons were not without their clouds. Shortly before leaving Australia for, in all probability, the last time, his adored wife of some 10 years, Sophia, had been stricken by a sudden illness and shortly thereafter died. The tragedy had tickled the jaded palates of London society, and he had been in receipt of a blizzard of invitations on his arrival, a blizzard that only grew denser after his knighthood. The vast majority, however, were graciously declined. The great knight's heart was broken and might never be repaired. It was all too desperately romantic, and the gossip columns speculated gently upon it for some weeks until there was nothing left to say. Now Sir Johnathan sat in endless mourning in his house, and Grant read from the card, barking. It's usual for me to go over first for an interview, you understand, to tell Sir Johnathan what to expect, to settle the time, to make sure that there's nothing that might upset Miss Trent. She's very sensitive, of course, and the oddest things can cause her physical distress. The man nodded. I'll tell the governor. We can settle all that by telegram, right? Grant nodded. The man's diffidence had slowly evaporated as they had spoken, and the sense that Grant was sharing a room with a dangerous animal had returned to him. He wanted to be done with the man as soon as he could. I dare say. That's settled then. He stuck out his hand. Good to meet you, Mr. Grant. Grant shook it. You didn't mention your name? Me. The man seemed bemused that anyone would want to know it. My name's Lynch. Good day to you, Mr. Grant. Grant dined at the Plantagenet Rooms in that afternoon, alone but for his thoughts and a steak and kidney pie. He knew he should have been delighted. He avoided all but the periphery of London's spiritualist community, eager not to be associated too closely with that covey of table rappers and speakers in tongues. But even from that limited exposure, it was no secret that Sir Johnathan was a promiscuous and generous patron of spirit media the home counties over. There was hardly a one of them who hadn't been invited out to the house in the Fields of Barking to spew ectoplasm and intone unearthly verities in what they fondly hoped was something approximating the voice of the late Mrs. Clay. Whatever Sir Johnathan hoped to gain from these seances, however, he didn't seem to be finding it. Lucrative though these events were, they were also singular. Grant had not heard of a single spiritualist being invited back. Not that those so blessed were so very unhappy about that. They were delighted by the size of the checks they received for their troubles, and equally delighted that they did not have to trek out to the wilds east of the city again to a house that was generally agreed to be off-putting. Considering most of them had, in Grant's estimation, the spiritual sensitivity of a leg of mutton, it was striking how many described the atmosphere of the house as unpleasant. Perhaps, Grant thought, indulging in a sip from his half-pint of brown ale, it really was haunted. We are reading Shadow on the Glass by Johnathan Howard. Sorry, there's a line break, and I saw someone asked. Later, he was to have reason to think the house in Kensington was haunted, if only by strange men intently reading the plaque on the doorpost. Another client, he thought, and assuming the friendly, if slightly distant mind that he had developed for the role of the spiritist agent, sometimes amanuensis, he'd made to greet the stranger. But the man turned to face him, and Grant had the very strong sense that the man wasn't nearly enough of a stranger at all. "Mr. William Grant," said the man in a no-nonsense, let's-get-the-pleasantries-out-of-the-way tone that Grant knew all too well. It took a huge effort of will for him to only say, "That's me. How can I help you?" rather than the reflexive, "Yes, officer," that lurked in the back of his throat. He knew that man. He felt sure, and the great deal of Lancastrian accent that had been squeezed into 6 syllables made it seem very likely he was from the streets of Manchester. This, Grant felt, did not bode well. "Might I have a word, Mr. Grant? Not here, indoors, maybe?" "What's this about?" The man sighed and showed Grant the palm of his gloved hand, and there, cupped within it to avoid it being seen by passerby, was a Metropolitan Police warrant card. Grant's heart sank, though he did his best to hide his dismay. "Well, you'd better come in, I suppose. You can tell me there." For the second time in a couple of hours, he walked up to his rooms, followed by a man he dearly wished wasn't there. As before, he led the officer to his office and offered him a chair, which he declined. "That's all right, sir. I wasn't planning on staying long." "May I see your bona fides again, please?" said Grant, trying to sound extra southern via the deployment of Latin. It seemed to work. "You what?" said the police officer, then, "Oh, me card, of course. Detective Sergeant N. Bradley," Grant read from it. "Thank you." The name was all too familiar. Grant remembered walking across Albert Square in Manchester one day 3 years before with an acquaintance of dubious honesty who suddenly stopped him and threw him to one side to avoid another brace of men walking by from the town hall. "That's Detective Jerome himself," whispered his companion, watching the pair as they went by, deep in conversation. "With another of his lot, Bradley that one is, all as keen as mustard to fill his boots when the time comes. Word of the wise, you remember those faces and you avoid them all right." Grant had moved all the way to London to do so, and a fat lot of good it seemed to have done him. "So, what's this about, Detective Sergeant?" Bradley looked at the phrenology bust sitting on the side table with obvious disapproval before replying. "You're in the ghost game, I understand, Mr. Grant. You and Miss Cerulia Trent." "Ghost game? If you mean we experiment in spiritualism, yes, that's true." Bradley was looking around the room, and Grant began to wish that he hadn't lavished quite so much on its discordant decorations. The initial intention was that it should overawe visitors, but it was plainly provoking Bradley in quite another way. "Does very well for you, obviously." He looked Grant in the eye. "Must be very lucrative, these experiments." "All contributions are voluntary. We have never asked for money." "Don't need to, though." Bradley went off to glare at the framed chakra chart. "Do you?" Grant began to understand what was actually happening. Bradley had no solid evidence of anything. His intention was purely to intimidate and leave Grant with no doubt he and Lizzie were now very much under the microscope. Bradley didn't especially care if he would ever be able to put them on the dock. He would be perfectly happy just to be shot of them out of his parish. This was starting to sound appealing to Grant, too. "I am not sure I quite understand what it is to which you're alluding, officer," said Grant carefully, sure that if he tried to speak any more southernly, he would dissolve into a cloud of pure grammar. "Yes, you do, sir. You understand very well. He walked over to Grant and studied his face carefully. I feel sure I've seen you somewhere before, sir. Perhaps on the street. I don't think so, sir. I've only recently joined the Metropolitan Force. Previously, I was in Manchester. Well, that can't be it. I haven't been in Manchester for a good many years, said Grant. And even then it was only for a couple of days. Perhaps you're thinking of somebody else. I don't have a very distinctive face. Bradley was silent for several seconds, and Grant knew with sickening certainty that Bradley was no longer trying to identify him, but committing his face to memory. I wouldn't say that, sir, Bradley said finally. I wouldn't say that at all. He hardly waited for Lizzie to open the door before he pushed inside and paced furiously up and down the floor. It's over, he said distractedly. They're on Lewis. Lizzie closed the door and looked at him, worried. Who? What are you talking about? I just had a blue bottle I know from Manchester turn up right on the bloody doorstep and all but tell me to get out of town unless I don't want my collar filled. So, they've got no case. He's just fishing, Bill. He stopped and glared at her. And he'll keep on fishing until he has something that'll stand up. This fella, he had a chip on his shoulder, I'm telling you, wants to make his mark, and he won't do that without rest. And you know him? To look at. He didn't know me, but he does now. This whole game, Lizzie, if we could only play it when folk would be discreet. This Bradley fella, somebody's talked to him. How else will he know about us? A brass plate saying Miss Cerulia Trent, spiritist, maybe? He thought about that. No, it can't be that easy, can it? He just read the plate and decided to run a stick along the railings along the strength of it. You tell me. He's a detective with something to prove. Strolls into town from some backwater. Manchester's not exactly a backwater. And spots a chance to make a bit of noise, so you tell me, does that sound like the kind of thing he'd do? Grant nodded. Aye, it is that. Fact remains he's got something to prove, and I don't fancy being the poor beggar who proves it on, and nor should you. Lizzie sat down. That much is true. He'll stick to our heels like fresh tar now. Sit down, Bill. You're making me feel tired. Grant pulled up a chair and sat opposite her. What we gonna do? I hadn't really thought about what to do in such a happenstance. Always thought we'd be able to just pull the wool over everyone's eyes and make ourselves scarce if any sort of trouble blew along, but this geezer's gonna make the whole town uncomfortable for us. She shrugged. Find a silver lining, I suppose. How do you mean? She smiled a little wanly. Maybe this is the world telling us it's time to go and trouble the French after all. He could hardly hide his surprise. You really want to? It's not a terrible idea, though I would have preferred to be doing it a year or two down the road. I've been thinking about it. We need some bedding and time and some flash to ginger up the plants, but I'm not sure we have enough gilt to do a bang-up job of it. Maybe we do, but it'd be tight. Not really the way I wanted it. Silver linings, eh? I might have one for you. And he told her about the visit from Sir Donovan Clay's man, Lynch. She was duly impressed. Clay's meant to be swimming, isn't he? Lighter cigars with 10 bob notes. That might be putting it a bit strongly, but yes, this place of his out in the east is supposed to be a big old house full of staff. Spot pin, the silk cravat big enough to make a Dutchman stare. More money in the bank than he knows what to do with. I have a few ideas what we could do with it. I Me too. Lizzie, if we're gonna go after Sir Donovan, we're gonna have to make a bloody good fist of it, especially if he's gonna part with any of his pile. Never mind the sort of grab we're gonna need for France.
Don't worry about that. I had a feeling he'd come knocking. He's bothered every other table rapper in town. He even had Mr. Tolliver in, and you'd have to be born touched to believe a word Tolliver says. Paid him, though. Paid him well. Tolliver was strolling around the cock of the walk afterward.
But Tolliver's an idiot.
Exactly. And if the likes of him can do well with Sir Donovan, how do you think we might fare, eh?
Grant considered this. He smiled. Bonjour, France, he said, employing the hardest pronunciation of J. Lizzie smiled and smiled to see him smile. Then she sobered.
But we can't beat around the bush. This detective will be looking to make life difficult as quick as ever as he can. You get a telegram sent from appointment to get over to Barkin, find the lay of the land. I'll start finding out what I can about Sir Donovan. We'll give him a seance he won't soon forget. Then we're off and away, sharp as you like.
Travel to Calais and then down to the Mediterranean. There you go. She nodded.
It's supposed to be warm down there, isn't it?
Warm as toast, and full of old rich folk, I'm told.
Good enough. One thing, though, Bill. I don't want to do the spiritualist game anymore, right? Let's think of something different, eh?
Grant was momentarily dumbfounded. Change the game? You're so good at it.
Well, I'll get good at something else. I'm tired of dabbling with the dead, Bill. I've got my limits. I don't want to do it no more.
He wanted to argue, but he couldn't find it in himself to do so. She really was so very good at easing the ghost from people's words. It scared him sometimes, honestly and truly. But there was much about their plan that lacked logic. If he had cared to examine it carefully, it would make much more sense for them to share out their reserves and head in opposite directions, for example. But that thought had occurred to neither of them. The very fact that it hadn't, of course, was also the explanation for why it hadn't. But they couldn't see that either. And so, tied together by more than money and circumstance, they made their plans for the morrow. And that is the end of chapter 2.
Nice.
Do we think we can make it through chapter 3? We started late. It was about an hour. And 38 pages in the time that I started. And the next chapter ends at like page 54. Do we want to shoot for it or stay where we're at? Because it's 9:30 now. Seems a good place to stop. I was like, I don't know. We'd be pushing it right up to a few minutes before 10 if we did that. If I managed to make through it. Can my voice handle it? I don't know. Great question. I don't know. So, also, it is atrociously hot. I closed the window, and that made it so much hotter in here. Yeah. I don't like having to try and, like, flip-flop accent imposter my way through fucking another chapter. But yeah, like the way it's written is it'll be very proper English, correct pronunciation, and then you'll have like weren't, but it's spelled W-U-N-T. Like that. And so you're like, that's clearly you're clearly dropping like so that's the Manchester thing is like dropping consonants and like dropping the glottal stop sort of deal where it's like just don't say that bit and everything that ends in ing is just gone.
Which is really fucking funny because if you go to northeastern Pennsylvania, that's how we speak. But we don't have a fun little affectation to it.
Yeah, no, you just drop it.
Just drop it.
Just drop it.
I can't be fucked with that.
But more than half the time, it's like, here's a Manchester guy trying to pretend like he's not from Manchester, and I'm like,
Are we going hunting?
what?
Are we
How do I
going
do
hunting?
that? You know how hard it is to look. I just gotta like find compilation videos of like, dude from Manchester tries to sound like an Australian for 5 minutes on YouTube, and I'm like, no, I can't do that. That's terrible. This sounds terrible. Terrible.
I didn't know Charles Barkley was going to be here today. Just terrible.
Yeah, and then like some part of it is like extra enunciating consonants just to sound more educated a lot of the time. That's pretty much what it is.
Okay, so do you want to tell them what I equated it to? Like when you told me about her accent? I'm like, so we're talking Eliza Doolittle here. The Rhine and the Spine. Stein, Smiley, and the Pline.
I was like, Dad got here, and I was like sitting here with like flip-flopping between like a handful of YouTube videos, and I mean a handful, like a good 6 or 7 different video compilations of just like, and the thing was is I was going through Manchester, and then I switched to Australian, and Dad was like, what are you doing?
Well, what's going on there, bud?
He's like, what accent are you doing? I was like, all of them.
Oh,
All of them.
fun. Explain.
It's gonna be so bad. I'm so bad at it. I'm so bad at accents. And he was like, okay.
Let me see if I can explain some of them to you, because that's where my tism comes in.
Yeah, anyway, but that was fun. Shakespeare sounded more like the U.S. South.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
Oh, no.
Oh, verily I say to thee, thou art more. Just over here.
Yeah, so this was fun.
Wackadoo.
Oh, man, everybody strap in for another several weeks of me doing terrible British accents. If you wanted to hear an American struggle their way through fucking 5 different subsets of accents with another accent on top of it, get ready, buckos. Like, this is the live for you. Anyway, that's your comedy special for the day. I hope everybody enjoyed that. We're gonna play more Control after this. So I hope everybody is down for that. We will be back here next week with more Shadow on the Glass. I'm going to try and get everything updated. We're definitely doing Cats. I was wrapping up to that. Yay, Control. Are we glad to be back with Control? I figure we just flip-flop through video games, so I'm going to start switching them at random. You guys are going to have to keep up. No, we're just going to go through Control for the foreseeable future until I get frustrated. That's how this works. Because Control is arduous, and I forgot all the controls to Control. So we're going to have a real fun time.
You're going to be in no control.
No control will be had in this playthrough of Control. And I hope it is to the entertainment of everyone around. You've been playing it? That's fantastic. I have it on PlayStation. I don't know if you have it on PlayStation. If you know the controls on PlayStation, that'd be super helpful. Because I know the second I start up that game, I'm going to try and open the menu or the map, and I'm immediately going to throw a copy machine into the ground at top speed, and then fly off a banister and fall all 4 stories down the Panopticon. So that's what I think I'm going to do, but if it doesn't have to be that way, I would prefer that it doesn't. I want to go back to the fungus lady, but she doesn't seem to have her shit in order yet. I want to get the fungus lady over with. Anyway, we're going to be doing the Singapura today, so that'll be fun. This is adorable. The beautiful Singapura cat has an intriguing origin story. 2 American breeders brought 3 cats back from Singapore in the 1970s, claiming they'd found the cats there as representatives of local street cats. Local street cats do have representation in Singapore, and that I appreciate. We need more. Look, we need more representatives for street cats. Anyway. These 3 were bred to form the Singapore breed, named from the Malay word for Singapore. Singapore cats are distinguished by their Abyssinian-like ticked brown coat, and in fact, only one specific coloration is recognized for show Singapuras. In Singapore, the city copes with massive monsoons each year by having a huge system of sewers and drainage beneath the city, and the feral cats that live there are also called drain cats. Another breeder later visited Singapore and discovered that the 3 original Singapore cats had, in turn, been brought to Singapore from the United States. Rather than being true local drain cats, the original Singapuras are believed to be Abyssinian mixes bred by the people who found them in Singapore. And here's this baby.
Oh, kitty.
Big ol' eyes.
Looks like it needs sleep with the coloration.
This big ol' eyes. Look at these big ol' eyes. Big ol' ears. It does kind of look like an Abyssinian in its build, though. Mm-hmm. Maybe not as lanky. And, like, the entire coat isn't uniform. But it does have... Thank you for the screenshot there. But yeah, anyway, that's your cat fact for the day. I like that you guys are still in the cat facts. I feel like anybody else would have been like, okay, we're done with the cats. We get that you like the cats. The other day, Dave was trying to figure out what kind of cat was from this TikTok video, and I was like, I have a book. I have a book. Let me go get the book. Don't move. And he was just like, okay. And I was like, I feel like you didn't even take into account that I have a book. Look at this book. I have a whole book of cats. Let me go find the cat.
The Book of Cats.
The Book of Cats. Speaking of cats, I don't know where any of mine are.
I'm surprised they didn't try and bust it.
I know. This is the first time in weeks that they haven't been like, I gotta get through this door. They do at least one time. Mm-hmm. At least one cat is like, I need that good pump water. And then barrels through here to... Generally, I don't, the only real problem is a Pond tries to take out the ring light, and Minty tries to take out the book. Those are my 2 problems.
Yeah.
Pond is like, I gotta fucking knock over this light, and then knocks over the light. And then Minty is like, I gotta get him to drop this book.
He's not paying me attention.
I might have a cat living with me next year. That's great. Well, I think it's great. Is it great? That sounds great to me. But it might not be for you. I hope it is for you. I hope you have a fun time with your cat. Great. As long as you want the cat. You made it sound like I'm rooming with this cat next year. It didn't sound...
Great deal on rent.
I'm going to be living with this cat next year. He's going to be in charge of utilities, and then I'm in charge. Yeah. My friend is moving to my state with his cat. Cat!
Kitty.
Well, I hope that you would give us the cat intro that I firmly believe we in this community deserve.
Uh-huh.
Of course, if it's your friend's cat.
Get your friend's permission.
Yeah. Get permission before you post other people's cats, but I would like to see the cat.
Always.
I believe all of us, as a conjoined, as a unified group, would appreciate seeing the cat. This is me requesting a formal introduction when your friend gets here next year. This is long in advance. Tell me about the cat. Yeah, we got 20 minutes still until 10. We can go ahead and wrap up early and then start Control, or I can sit here and waffle for a bit if you want me to waffle.
My leg is itchy.
What? What did you say?
My leg is itchy. It's no longer in the pain phase. It's itchy now.
Oh, I thought you said something else.
What did you think I said?
I don't know.
Okay.
But it sounded offensive mildly.
Oh. No, it was not offensive at all.
Oh, man. I can hear a cat outside the door. heard one. I heard one. It's Minty. Yeah, I was gonna say, I knew I heard a cat. Hi, Minty.
Hey, friend.
The live is over.
Live is over. You can come over. You're a psychopath now.
Yeah.
There you go.
Don't worry, I'm not holding a book.
There you go.
Everybody say hi to Minty. Minty's very happy to be here. Who's a good kitty?
There's your last 20 minutes. It's just petting Minty.
Yeah, you just pet Minty for 20 minutes. Look, I think it's time we all had, as a community, we all participated in a guided meditation. And the guided meditation is just you petting whatever animal is closest to you at this time for the remaining 20 or so minutes we have in this life.
Alright, let me go grab another cat.
Just breathe in. Hold it. Breathe out. That's it. Pet this cat. And or dog. Yeah, Toby nopes that. Toby's not about the guided meditation. I'm sorry, Toby. So if you have... Oh, we already get a cat intro. Cash is in the Discord, you guys. I want to see the... No animal is near me, though. Should I pet my fake squish?
Oh, baby.
Do I get to see the cat? Aw, Ginger boy.
And there you go.
Oh, I love the face plant.
Oh, yeah.
I just love it when cats do that. When they're just like, I'm gonna go to sleep. Face down.
Oh, gosh.
Can't breathe. I don't know how they breathe like that. It's so adorable. Oh.
Hiding in the banky.
That's adorable.
I'm ready for my close-up, Mr. DeMille.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. I have a lot of blankets in gray, and sometimes Minty will just blend in. I have a blanket of it's got the raven printed on it, and it's almost entirely gray. And sometimes Minty will curl up in it, and I'll lose the cat, and then I won't notice, and I'll go to sit down, and then I'll almost sit on the cat because I thought the cat was the blanket. That's only if she doesn't have her eyes open, though. But she does nap there. Normally she naps where Dad's at, but if I'm sitting in the chair, she'll nap on the blanket. I'll lose her. She'll be gone.
It looks like he's been caught doing something wrong.
Oh, adorable.
Just a baby.
Yeah? Are you enjoying the scritches? Leaning her head into my hand.
We got beans.
Oh, toe beans.
We got beans.
Toe beans. You want to show your toe beans off to the internet? Toe beans. Yeah. Minty's not picky about that. Pond is. Pond does not want her feet pictures on the internet.
No, she does not.
Yeah. It makes her so upset.
Don't even think about her beans.
Yeah. Yep. Hmm. You good? Where are you going? Where are you planning to go? Are you just trying to make...
What are you doing? What are you doing?
I wonder how long she was out there.
I don't know, but she gave the biggest yawn. I can see your brain level size yawn.
Okay, so funny thing about Minty, she likes it when you stick your finger in her mouth and then move it around.
What a weirdo.
Yeah, that's why she yawns and opens her mouth so much, is because Dave started doing that to poke her tongue when she yawned, and then eventually she just sort of lays there, and occasionally she'll lay there and just slightly open her mouth. just because she knows it'll get Dave to poke her in the tongue, and then she'll just keep doing it. Sometimes she'll yawn 2 or 3 times in a row because Dave pokes her tongue. Yeah.
I'm getting that good. The good pump water.
Yeah, the pump water. That's what Dave keeps calling it, and then I started calling it that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good kitty.
Anyway, we're gonna migrate over to the Discord now. And we will pick up next week where we left off with Shadows on the Glass. I hope you all like the book. I'm looking forward to reading it. Accent, no accent, doesn't matter. It's still a really good book if you can overlook my atrociousness at reading it. So,
It's not atrocious.
Alright, sure. Anyway, I'll see you next Tuesday at 8 Central for more cat facts and more book. And then in a few minutes, when I get everything set up, hopefully nothing goes wrong because I tried to reset up the PlayStation, we will play more Control, and I will see you in a few minutes. If not, I'll see you next week. Dad, do you have anything you'd like to say? Parting words of wisdom from Dad?
Yeah. You're only given one little spark of madness. You mustn't lose it.
Don't lose that madness, guys. Because if you lose it, who knows where you're going to find more. So, we'll see you guys next week. Thank you all for joining me.